Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm going to try one more time. We see if enough volume. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the entire family, I want to welcome you to this celebration of the life of Kenneth Dale Salomon. Thank you all so much for being here. Your presence brings comfort and strength to Marty and to all of Ken's family. We have gathered here today to remember and honor a truly unique, extraordinary man. We come together in grief today because our love for Ken is real. And I pray that God's compassion and grace might begin to heal our hearts as we share our memories today. We also gather with gratitude to God as we remember the blessings of Ken's life and the gift that he was to us all. He was kind and generous, always ready to offer help. He loved to tell stories about his life, and he often reflected upon the meaning of his experiences with humor and deep wisdom. He was a man who loved the rules and order of military service and life as a sheriff, even as he loved the art of jazz and the flow of his saxophone. He considered his responsibilities to his family as a husband and a father, a grandfather, a great and a great-great and a great-great-great. Not really, but it'll happen someday. To be his deepest honor and his greatest blessing from God. Above all, Ken was a man of a strong mind and uncompromising integrity. We grieve his loss, but we can also celebrate. All that Ken was lives on in our hearts and in God, where Ken is now held in an eternal embrace. We remember the promise of Jesus who said, "I am the resurrection and I am life. Because I live, you also will live." I invite you all to join with me in prayer. Gracious God, we gather here in the protective shelter of your healing love to give you thanks for Ken. We thank you for the love and care and joy that he has given to us, and we thank you for graciously receiving him into the everlasting arms of your mercy. Be with us as we share our memories. Help us to pour out any sadness, to comfort one another in our common loss, and to find joy in the love and life that we have shared together. Let us hear your words of hope and assurance, and so celebrate Ken's life. Bring us the gift of your presence and your peace. Amen. And now I'd like to introduce representatives of our U.S. Air Force coming from the Travis Air Force Honor Guard, and they will be presenting military honors today. When TAPS is played, everyone is invited to stand. I did mention there would be tears today. We're going to let the tears continue to flow as we join in singing our opening hymn, Precious Lord, Take My Hand. If you're willing and able, we'd invite you to stand. Please be seated.
Hello. My name is Lisa Fee. I am the wife of Paul Fee, Ken's son. It is my absolute privilege today to speak to you about Ken Salomon, a man who I grew to deeply respect and honor. When I told Marty that I would speak and say some scriptures from the Bible at Ken's service, I decided to talk about him through 3 different areas of his life: his serving Christian nature, his love of music, and his relationship with Jesus Christ. When I first met Ken, I could tell immediately that he had that Christ-like serving attitude towards everyone. Marty, do you remember as soon as he found out I played flute, I was being sent crystal flutes? Because he knew I would love it. He knew I would enjoy it. So he had that attitude about him where he wanted to serve others, and he simply enjoyed helping anyone who needed it, and often would give different items or gifts that he knew they would enjoy. He had a very helpful approach to people, and he used that servant's attitude to help people when they needed it most. 1 Peter 4:10 through 11 states that whatever gifts we have received from the Lord, we are to use those as good stewards to help others and to support others as faithful stewards of God's grace given to us. Ken used his many God-given gifts and talents to help others when they experienced problems, challenges, troubles, or they were just down. His fine as frog's hair phrase there on the cover is just so him. I just love that about him. Ephesians 6, 7, and 8 says that rendering service with a goodwill to others as you would to the Lord, and not to man, knowing that whatever good anyone does, this he will receive back from the Lord. I would say that Ken accomplished this with the Lord's help in many ways of his life while working at the Sheriff's Department, his membership and service as a Freemason, and helping his many friends and neighbors. Another one of Ken's God-given gifts obviously was his love of music, and that was always a part of his life. During his life, in service to his country, he served in the Air Force Band, and later in his life, he performed in many musical groups in the Bay Area. He always enjoyed talking with band members about music. I specifically remember him saying that and how he so enjoyed you all. Psalm 98:4 states that we are to make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth break forth into joyous song and sing praises. Ken certainly did not hold back in his enjoyment or joyful noise to the Lord through his talents. Ephesians 5:19 says that we are to make a melody to the Lord with our hearts. Ken's heart sang to the Lord through his musical talent, gracefully touching the lives of many others, including mine, through the friendships that developed as a result of his love for music. Ken knew the Lord. He recognized the significance of a relationship with Christ and what this meant for his eternal soul. Our souls will live forever, but it's only a matter of location. I would like to share with you all that I am incredibly grateful that Ken was saved and he knew Jesus Christ as his personal Lord and Savior. 2 Corinthians 5:8 says that when we are absent from our bodies, we are present with the Lord. For this reason, I know he is in the arms of Christ and is more alive now than either you or I standing or sitting here today. 1 Thessalonians 4:13 says that if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring with him all those who sleep in Jesus. Ken is alive today and forevermore because of Christ. Thank you.
This is my sister Mary, my backup. Before I get started, I want to thank these 5 musicians who were all on the Hornet Band and in other bands with Ken. And in particular, Ken is with us today. Ben Benavides, is playing his alto sax. Okay. In July of 2000, my neighbor, Deputy Sheriff Debbie Ingalls, pressured Ken and me to go on a blind date because it was a benefit for the East Bay Cancer Support Group, Ken having lost his wife, Vi, of 37 years to cancer. Since the event was at Yoshi's, jazz-loving Ken agreed. I agreed because he'd been with Vi for 37 years, and I'd been single for many years, and I thought, he must be both grieving and horrified at the thought of taking another woman on a date. And this wasn't going anywhere. It was safe. It's a one-time thing. I'm done. A year later, another concert at Yoshi's, and this time Ken was on his knee, proposing marriage. In my surprise and elation, I threw my arms up, hit his hand, and sent my engagement ring flying. That was the beginning of our 23-year romance. October 2001, we were married at my folks' home in New Hampshire and briefly honeymooned in the White Mountains. When Ken retired in January 2003, he began taking our 2 grandkids, Jake and Jess Martin, to the Jelly Donut for donuts before delivering them to their schools or daycare. He loved kids, their unfiltered observations and innocence. He delighted in spending time with all of his grandchildren. Just before retiring, I asked Ken to follow his passion for music, playing the bari sax. In exchange, I wanted him to wine and dine me, which he did, bless his heart. True to his promise, he bought a beat-up bari sax for $975, paid $1,000 to fix it, and joined the Amish Shrine Band and the Pleasanton Community Band. After many years without an instrument, his courage to jump right back in and play and commit to playing in a band really impressed me. I wasn't that brave. His long days of practicing and playing the bari sax with the Air Force Band allowed that music to come back. When he was playing in various bands 3 to 4 nights a week, I finally told him, it would be nice to have you home, 1 or 2 nights a week. And he did. He gave me more time. In going through his den, I found an envelope with $1 inside and a note that this was the money he'd earned, the first money he earned playing for the USS Hornet Band, which proves that musicians play for the joy of music, not for the money. In 2009, Ken assumed directorship of the U.S. Hornet Band along with his partner, bassist Bob Wiseman, and they played for tea dances at the Fremont and Union City Senior Centers, for events on the Hornet, and some other events. But his favorite gig was the naturalization ceremonies on the Hornet, which are very special. You see many countries represented, and it's just super special. Due to his lung cancer, he retired from the band in 2018, but he continued as a backup bari sax player for the Livermore Nightlife Band until April of last year. Ken also directed the Amish Shrine Band for many years. In 2022, when there were only 3 active bandsmen and the building was sold, the band room had to be emptied. Our very small home became the recipient of 4 file cabinets of music, 18 various marching band drums went into the already full garage, the sousaphone, tuba, trumpet, 2 trombones, 7 glockenspiels, and a pair of marching cymbals all came to rest in the family room and entryway. And clutter isn't my thing. So I was close to having a fit, actually. Okay, the Ken that I knew and loved was patriotic, sensitive, kind, thoughtful, generous, opinionated, yes, determined but not stubborn, and unselfish. He never complained, always trying to be positive. He valued truth and honesty and respect for others. Whenever I was stubborn, he just smiled and said, "I love you." If asked how he was feeling, he would answer, "I'm just as fine as frog's hair, and that's so fine you can hardly see it." I have been blessed with so many memories of family get-togethers, days in the country at Sheep Ranch Home, of travel adventures of all the music, church, Masonic, deputy, and neighborhood friendships. Ken is with us today, again, in the presence of his alto, which Ben will be playing later, and along with the rest of the band. Thanks to all of you who have called, sent cards, and visited us in the past few months. It gave us so much joy and happiness to just spend the time with you. And thank you all for being here today to honor Ken.
Hi. I would like to share with you today the trajectory of the life of Kenneth Dale Salomon, as seen through the eyes of one of his 2 stepsons. I use the term stepson only to describe the historical lineage, not to diminish the impact Ken had upon my life. He was not my biological father, but his emotional, intellectual, and spiritual DNA flows through me and always will. I use the term trajectory purposely because our lives are not lived at a fixed point. We each travel a path with a beginning, a middle, and an end. We begin at one place with one set of circumstances, and over the passage of time, with actions and inactions, with preparation, with happenstance, through challenges and opportunities, both in and out of our control, we will end up in a very different place, usually an unexpected place. Sometimes good places, and sometimes very difficult places. Such is the nature of our lives. For those of you gathered here today who do not know me personally, I am Paul Dennis Fee. I'm the second son of Mary Salomon, Ken's previous wife before Marty, who passed away in 1999, and Edward Francis Fee, who passed away in 2001. My two older sisters, Betty Lou and Barbara Ann, had already left with their husbands to begin their lives by the time my living memory starts. I was just a small child. I was raised by Ken and my mother, and from my earliest memories, that is where I begin my description of Ken's impact to my own personal trajectory. With my younger sister, Laura Lee, and my older brother, Mitch, excuse me, our family grew up in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains in Calaveras County, about 2.5 hours drive east from here. This is not an area known for its economic opportunity or its vibrant economy or its abundance of jobs. It was, at best, a hardscrabble life filled with challenges for even the most prepared and many pitfalls for those who were unprepared. And our family fell into the latter category because the desire for my parents not to raise their children in the city overwhelmed all other concerns. Ken had grown up in Castro Valley, and he inherently knew of the difficulties faced by urban dwellers. He maintained a disdain for city life, and it was not something that he wanted to raise his kids in. And I understand that. I do now. At the time, it was confusing as a child, but I have no living memory of ever living in the city. My youth was spent among the mountains and trees, hiking in woods along streams and rivers in the Sierra Nevada mountains. I knew little of the workings of the inner city, and for that I'm grateful. I remain a country boy at heart, and thanks to Ken, it will always be so. Because of the opportunities, the mountains were few. I knew the effects of living in an endless cycle of wants and needs. I knew what it was like to live in hand-me-down clothes. I knew what it was like to go hungry. As a child, you can grasp the idea that resources are limited, but what you don't grasp is the deep and destructive shame that burdens parents because of this economic situation. I can only imagine how it felt for Ken at the time, as a father of a family, to be constantly struggling and seldom succeeding, and trying to bring a sense of security and abundance under very difficult circumstances. I greatly admire his persistence. His persistence brought us out of that. Despite the challenging realities of that time, Ken had a vision of something better for his family and for himself. That vision never left him. He was always trying to work towards something better. He started planning and taking action. Things began to change. Instead of being a bartender or a manual laborer, the things that he did to earn money back in those early tough days, he had always admired law enforcement and he had close friends who were law enforcement officers, because when you're a bartender, you deal with law enforcement officers, apparently. So he had a few of them that he became very close with. He had great respect and admiration for them. He used the expression, "damn good cop," and that meant something to him. He used that as a way to express his admiration for those special few who really took their commitment to protect and serve seriously. As a bartender, he had frequent interactions with them, and several were great friends. That began a trajectory that included becoming a reserve officer in our mountain community. I'm not going to pretend that as a teenager it was a great idea from my perspective. Yes, there was a lot of challenges with that. But that time in uniform began for Ken a significant change in his own personal trajectory. He didn't want to be a temporary cop. he'd had a taste of it, and he knew what he really wanted. He wanted to be a full-time cop. So that's where he set his sights, and he did everything in his power to become that full-time sheriff's deputy, which is exactly what he did. He had so much at the time working against him. He didn't fall into the typical pattern of a cop of that time because he wasn't the right age, he didn't have the right background, he didn't fall into the typical career path for law enforcement. His overwhelming qualification at the time was his overwhelming desire to be what he was meant to be. He was meant to be a damn good cop. He knew that nothing was going to stop him, and he didn't let it stop him. His perseverance was incredible. I witnessed it personally. He spent the rest of his career being who and what he was meant to be. He was that damn good cop. His dogged determination eventually paid off, and in subtle ways it rubbed off on me. I watched him struggle. I watched him toil. But I watched him succeed. His perseverance was remarkable. And that lesson of perseverance has stuck in me. I'll admit it right now, in front of friends and family. I was an oddball little kid. I wasn't very smart. I wasn't very athletic. I wasn't really talented. I wasn't handsome. I wasn't outgoing and popular. I was pretty boring and inconsequential. And I'm just being truthful here. But the one thing that lit a fire underneath me turned out to be music. Kid loved listening to music and played records a lot. I listened to jazz and Count Basie, and he had a small collection of records that, as I listened to them, I became more and more interested in music. He didn't speak at the time, and I don't remember it as a young child of him talking about playing in a band when he was in the Air Force and things like that, because he didn't really have the luxury of, I don't know if he was just setting those things aside for then, but he then, as I became interested in it, then he began to encourage me. And so what happened was, later in high school, I became involved in high school music programs, and it brought out a side in me that I didn't know existed at the time. And it continues to this day. I'm not saying I'm great at it, because frankly, I'm not. However, I enjoy it. And that's what's important. I'm astonished how the trajectory of my life was directly and wonderfully guided by that early exposure to music through Ken's influence. To make a very long and complicated story short, I used that budding musical interest to start playing in long hair rock and roll bands. Yes, I had a ponytail down to my butt, much to his chagrin. Amplifiers and speakers were always breaking and blowing up, so I learned how to check tubes at the drugstore. Remember when we used to do that? Okay. I learned how to solder wires. I learned how to put things together and fix them when they were broken. I got pretty good at it, believe it or not. But there was so much more to learn. This was back in the early 1970s, and the terms electronics and computers were new on our lips, and we didn't know much about them, but we knew they were happening. So I, in my own way, recognized that was gonna be something to strive for. So it lit a fuse under me that still burns to this day, and I have Ken to thank for that direction. Ken had encouraged me at the time to join the military, to get real training and real experience. I chose the career path of a U.S. Navy sonar technician because there was a lot of audio training, that's what I specifically went for. And I ate it up as fast as it was given to me, but I loved the audio part, but what they also taught me was how to run a computer, sent me through electronic schools and said, even though I was in there to learn sound, for musical purposes, I learned computer hardware, computer software, and specifically the science of transmitting data between the sonobuoys that were dropped into the ocean to track submarines, and transmitting that data back over the radio to ships and planes for analysis. That early experience, like I said, it was a long and drawn-out story. That education experience in telemetry and computer hardware formed the basis of what became a 47-year career in the aerospace industry, for which I just retired on February 29th of this year. Ken's drive and persistence that I saw throughout his life planted a seed in me which came to fruition in my own life. I'm now sharing with you what I learned from him over time. Never give up. Keep your vision alive. Know what you are meant to be. After many hours of night school and after working full-time, just as Ken did, and after struggling to pay the bills, I built my career just as Ken did and followed my vision to become what I was meant to be, just as Ken did. I eventually achieved my own personal goals of becoming a principal engineer scientist working for the Space Force at Cape Canaveral, where my wife Lisa and I live on the Space Coast. It's been a highly improbable career for a little kid from Calaveras County living in Sheep Ranch. Anybody who's been there understands. It's a wide spot in the road in the middle of nowhere. I was able to achieve these things because of that trajectory that Ken helped kindle and encouraged me all those years ago. I'll thank him for the rest of my life. Scientists theorize that matter at its most basic and elemental level can neither be created nor destroyed. Matter simply exists, and it only changes form when external forces come into action to change the way it's manifested. It's my belief that love is exactly that same way. When my mother passed away, Ken was a seriously broken man. Those of you that are here understand that? We were all deeply wounded about his situation. We thought we could help in some way, and we all tried. In reality, we couldn't. We didn't have what it takes to ease that kind of pain. It took a very special person with a very special heart and a superhuman kindness, patience, and understanding to help console and tend to a broken man's heart. When God brought Marty and Ken together, there was a very deep purpose behind that miracle. Those of us privileged to have witnessed the profound healing that occurred through the resurrection of simple human love understand that purpose, and we are truly grateful. I'm thankful for having her wonderful soul in our family and in our hearts forever. The enduring life lessons that Ken's leave with, let me start again. The enduring life lessons that Ken leaves with us is the importance of having a dream and maintaining that vision which guides our own personal trajectory. He taught me by word and by deed, that the most insurmountable barriers that we will ever face are those barriers that we place in front of ourselves. And those that we place in front of ourselves, we can remove by ourselves. I love you, Dad. Thank you for an inspirational example of a life well led. Thank you.
One, two, one, two.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Now it's time to hear from all of you. We know that you all have memories and things that you would like to share as well. So Corey's going to be on this side. I'm going to be on this side. You don't have to come up here to the mic. Just stand where you are if you have something that you would like to share, and we will bring the microphone to you. So take a moment and then let us know if there's anything you would like to share about Ken.
Hi, I'm Mary. I work for Almi Shriners, and Ken used to come in and walk through the door and just start singing. It was just so awesome. He was always there for me and my husband. So.
Thank you. Come around this way.
My name's Ethel Hilburn. Ken and I worked together as deputy on the sheriff's department, and my daughter and I got to have a great visit with him and his wife and Goldie. We had a great time. It was just like the old Ken. And I also knew Vi, and when my brother got killed in '87, she came by with a van and helped transport our family.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric. I grew up with Paul and the Fee family and the Salomons, and they were pretty much a second family to me. And I remember Ken and Vi, when I was a little kid, he pretty much like an aunt and uncle to me, and I miss both of them very much. Thank you for them. Thank you for their influence in my life.
My name is Mike. I work with Ken over a 20-year period. There's 10 of us here from the Sheriff's Department. I don't even know everybody's name very easily, and there might even be more of you here that I didn't see. We were very fortunate to work with Ken. I worked with Ken when I very first came on in what was known at the time as a very rough place to work, which was called Greystone, which is a place that Ken really wanted to work at when he came on. It was interesting to me because I was in my 30s, in fact I was 30, and I don't know what age Ken was, but it was at least 10 years older than me. And it was interesting to work with somebody that I thought had been on the department a real long time, and only to know he'd only been on a couple more years than me. He was very influential, was always kind. He looks just like in those pictures you see there as he did the first day that I worked with him. And I never heard him say a bad word about anybody, a little different than myself, but it was really great working with him. And I think I can speak for all of us here that came, that he was a great man to work with.
My name's Jenny. I've had the pleasure of playing in a few bands with Ken. I started as a sub in one band, and then I ended up changing instruments, and he was very encouraging. That was one of the things he did best, was encourage. You can do this. Make a joyful noise. Just do it. Drive with me. That was an adventure. I am a driver, and driving with Ken was always an adventure. But we all survived to tell. And I enjoyed those times with him. I am grateful that I got the privilege to know the man, not as just a musician, but as a human being. His love for humanity, his love for music, his love for his wife, and his love for Goldie was always evident. If you had the pleasure to know Ken, you had the pleasure to know love and gentleness and meekness and a few colorful words sometimes, but always value. He valued people. And he showed that, and he did that with his actions, not just his words.
Hello, I'm Stacy Creasy. I guess I'd be the step-grandson-in-law. I came on the scene about 1989. I was stationed out at Alameda, and I met my wife, and my first encounter with Ken was at Thanksgiving dinner, and there's nothing more evident that he was very protective and loving of his family because he wore his shoulder gun to the Thanksgiving dinner. And so I knew right then, I better make sure I took care of his granddaughter. So that's just the kind of guy he was, but great guy, and I appreciate being a part of the family.
Maybe he just wanted to make sure the turkey was actually dead. Like, did you?
Hello, my name's
you wanna say
Robert
something, sir?
Branco. I had an opportunity to play with Ken in the Hornet Band trumpet, and we would always drive, and Jen would attest to it. We'd be driving to Alameda from Pleasanton, and I told Ken, there's traffic. Put the siren on top of the car. And he would say, I can't do that, I'm retired. He was a great man, loving father, took care of his family, loved his dog. I loved his Corys in the backyard. But we're gonna miss him because he was, led the Hornet Band. If you never had the opportunity, it was a great opportunity to be able to play on the ship. It would vibrate, when you play high notes, it'd sound great in there. So we're gonna miss him, and thanks for everything, the opportunity to be part of your life.
I'm Jim Westfall. I'm a fellow Mason and a Shriner. One of the purposes of the Masonry, Freemasonry, is to make a good man better, and Ken was a good man. He really was. I played with him, and I was one of the 3 or 4 remaining members of the Amish Shrine Band. I did play in the Hornet Band for a couple of years, I guess it was. I see a lot of faces I know, but everybody raise their hand that played in the Hornet Band? Oh, man,
Wow.
there's more than... You did too? Oh, okay. That was a lot of fun. And too bad you don't have a string bass up there because we have an expert. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a lot more. Would you like to say something?
Hi, I'm Darlene. I work at the VA in Martinez, and we have a stand down for homeless veterans, and Ken used to bring the Hornet Band out to the stand down at both Dixon and in Contra Costa Fairgrounds. But one year he brought a bunch of shakers, little shakers, and the children of the homeless veterans all played those shakers, and I'll always love Ken.
Oh, that's a great story. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Madeline Munoz, and I'm going to stand here by my husband, Victor. I'm going to try not to cry. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Victor, my husband, and Ken met when they were joined together as partners in a program sponsored by the Sheriff's Department, which they no longer have. And it was, they would go into various homes and work with people that were put on the ankle bracelet monitoring system. And they could not have picked 2 better men to conduct that program because both of them were kind and compassionate and respectful. No matter what they were walking into, they always went into it with the same attitude that these are human beings who deserve to be loved and respected just as we are. Vic would come home and talk about Ken and tell stories about him. He changed Vic's whole life in terms of seeing things in a different point of view at that point in his sheriff's career. He was in awe of Ken coming on the department as old as he was. And I couldn't wait to meet this man. And so the sheriff's department has barbecues every year, and so Vic and I attended one, and he goes, oh, you'll get to meet Ken and his wife, Marty. And that sparked a lifetime of friendship and love and great memories for the 4 of us. Ken and I loved him the minute I gave him his first hug, or he gave me his first hug. I could see how Vic loved him as much as he did. And then I gained a wonderful friend in Marty. We had so much in common, and we shared so many things, and oh my gosh, it was so wonderful talk to someone who understood what a pain in the ass, excuse my French, these men could be at times. It was a great support system because and then Vic and Ken would go off and they'd be, talking about their guns and their sheriffs and their politics and all that fun stuff, and Marnie and I'd just be gabbing away. So I not only gained a friend in Ken, but I gained a wonderful friend in Marty, who will remain a friend to both Vic and I for years to come, God willing. But Ken was just, as everyone has said, and everyone here can attest to, he was just one of a kind. He made you a better person. He made you want to do better in the world. And he will forever, ever be embedded in my heart, and I know in Vic's as well. So thank you, Ken. We love you.
Hi, my name is Vic Munoz. I worked with Ken over 20 years, like my wife said. One day I was working, Ken and I were working. It was about 5 p.m. We used to have a late lunch. We had our lunch early, but we'd always, 5 o'clock would show up and he'd pull out a sandwich and he'd give me half the sandwich and he'd eat the other half. He said his first wife, Vi, always wanted me to have half the sandwich. I tend to believe Ken wanted me just to share a meal with him at that time. Almost every day we worked. That's one story. The other story that I have is every morning I'd go in, and Ken always wanted, when we worked on the shift at work furlough, we'd go across the street to McDonald's, and it'd be a sausage patty, an egg McMuffin, sausage patty. And we'd come back and we'd share it with a cup of coffee with the other guys in the office. As time went on, everybody in the office passed away. Ken and I were the last couple. There were a few others that were there, Harry Mitchell and a few others that are still around. But we saw about 4 or 5 of our friends just go. And those times were really special to me. One other story, and I'll leave it after this. I was working with Ken one Christmas Eve, and we got a call of an incident that happened on 75th Avenue. We responded. We had a lady on an ankle bracelet program. We went to the house. Her ex-husband had showed up. She did the right thing. She called us, informed him he was there. He had a restraining order. We went to the house immediately, called OPD. They were on their way. Unbeknownst to us, we show up at this apartment house. Normally, OPD says they don't go in there without 5 officers. Ken and I go in there. We're in the middle of, people are looking at us from the 2nd story. We go in, we take care of the situation. We go in this apartment. This lady had no food in her refrigerator, nothing to drink. Kids were crying. She wasn't beat up or anything. I mean, she was just probably more verbal abuse than anything else. The guy had left. He was long gone. Next thing I know, Ken and I, we get together. We make the call and everything. Ken calls Salvation Army, has them get gifts for the kids. We go out, we buy a Christmas tree. We bring the Christmas tree to the house. Ken wants to get them food, so we get some food. We both chip in and we do this. Needless to say, our shift probably ended a couple hours later, but we were still working through on our own time, you might say. But Ken's always been an inspiration to all of us, and everybody in the sheriff's office should understand. When he first came on, I used to think, 44 years and you're coming on the department. I knew how it was when I was in my 20s, late 20s. And like Mike Theodore said, he was in his 30s. And I'm thinking, my God, all this running, all this working out, all this shooting, all this dealing with situations. And like I said, Ken was just an inspiration. I mean, he made it through everything. He did everything he said he was going to do. His integrity, his honor, and his commitment. That's what I'll always remember. And his respect for his fellow man. Thank you very much. Mike, you should be very proud. Marty, I mean, a wonderful lady. He told me, he said, he had 2 loves in his life. How lucky can I be? 46 years with Vi and another 23 with Marty. How wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to invite you all to continue sharing after the service during our fellowship time. I want to share just a few words, my own reflections about Ken and Marty, and especially about Ken's faith. I met Ken and Marty in 2020 when I was first appointed here at Linwood, and at that point, Ken had already nearly outlived his cancer diagnosis. And I was instantly taken by him, by his peace with life, by his wisdom, by his incredible love for Marty. I think the first time that I met you two, he introduced you as his bride, and I thought, well, they must have just gotten married. Oh no, I was wrong. He was strong and full of grit. You don't live in Alaska and Calaveras County without determination. But he was a true romantic. He knew that God had blessed him with 2 beautiful brides and this growing family that he was so very proud of. You miss some things when you meet people closer toward the end of their lives. I never got to see Ken in uniform. I didn't get to hear him play gig on the Hornet. I didn't know Ken and Marty when they were traveling the world and spending weekends playing music all over the Bay. But I did get to meet a man who was deeply reflective and honest about his life, someone who was ready to recount the best and the most difficult moments as he prepared himself to meet his God. Ken's earliest memories of God were of going to church with his grandfather. I think I remember that correctly. And his grandfather was a man that Ken respected very deeply. He liked the church a lot. He mostly agreed with the teachings. He believed in God's gift of grace through Jesus, and he definitely wanted to live up to the life of honesty and fairness and service that he was being taught about. But there was a problem. This church did not allow any instrumental music in worship. And this Ken could not abide. He knew the Psalms encourage us to make a joyful noise to the Lord. And yes, that's with our voices, but it's also with harp and horn and string and saxophone. He knew that his love for the saxophone was a gift from God, and so he left the church with his family's blessing. Later on, while he was stationed in Virginia, he found a United Methodist church that welcomed him with open arms. And he said that this was a very rare experience because servicemen were not really seen as part of the community. They were just passing through. So a lot of people didn't waste their time extending hospitality. This church was different. And throughout Ken's life, his experience and love and acceptance there remained his ideal. He knew that this community of welcome was also an experience of God. And I think that that's part of why he tried so hard to pass on that same love and acceptance to his family, to his colleagues, through his service, everywhere he went. One of the most pivotal moments in Ken's spiritual life occurred when he was in Alaska. So I'm guessing it was probably around 1960. It was a divine encounter, one that imparted a kind of perfect redemptive peace upon Ken's soul. Now I'm going to tell it as I remember it, probably not as Ken told it, but that's how memories work. So if you've heard this story, you can tell me your version of it. So it was late at night, and Ken was alone outside when he experienced what I think is known as ice fog. It's an incredibly rare phenomenon. It occurs most frequently when temperatures fall below negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. So you get the idea. It's not frequent that you see this, even when you're living in Alaska. So in ice fog, what happens is that fine ice crystallizes and suspends in the air. And then it eventually settles on all the surfaces of things in a way that makes the whole world kind of sparkle. So Ken walked into the silence of this ice fog. Can you picture it? Just walking through this winter wonderland with ice literally crystallizing and forming and suspending in the air all around him. And he said there was a silence and a peace that he had never experienced before, a beauty so supreme that it filled him with awe at the majesty of creation, at the majesty of his Creator. This rare glimpse of life convinced him that he needed to live in a new way, a more faithful, ethical, and loving way than he ever had before, a way that he lived throughout his life. In fact, it actually wasn't said that he did try to, become a member of law enforcement there in Alaska, right? And it didn't work out. If you've heard this story, it's maybe not church appropriate. There were some ladies of the night in a bar, and he realized that law enforcement in Alaska at that time did not live up to his own ethical standards. But he got where he needed to be eventually, in his own way. Ken's faith was incredibly strong. I know that all of us admire the way that he walked through his battle with cancer with dignity, with this incredible determination to make his own choices. It took courage and conviction and faith. Ken was leaving the loves of his life behind and trusting that God, the source of all love, would receive him on the other side. He had some doubts. We all do. He didn't doubt that God was real. He didn't doubt that Jesus was his Lord. He sometimes doubted that God could really forgive and welcome just a guy like him. It was the kind of doubt, I think, that comes from recognizing that God's love for us is more beautiful, more infinite, and unfathomable than even that ice fog. And yet, in the end, his answer was the simple word of Psalm 56:3, "When I am afraid, I put my trust in you." Ken trusted in God. He believed in the love and forgiveness of Jesus. He believed the words of the Apostle Paul, who said simply that nothing, no hardship, no distress, not even this horrible rending that we call death, can separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus. Nothing can separate Ken from the love of God in Christ Jesus. That's the promise of our faith, that Ken is now enjoying a new dimension of life and love that awaits us all. Amen. We're going to sing. We're going to sing, "Let There Be Peace on Earth." And we're going to hear the entire song first as an instrumental so we can hear the beautiful saxophone and piano. And then I'll motion to you when it's your turn to join in singing. Please join in singing. We'd invite you to be seated. We're going to close with a recording of God Bless America from the Overboard Band, and you get to see a few more scenes from Ken's life. On behalf of Ken's family, I want to extend an invitation to all of you to please join in the fellowship hall just across the courtyard for refreshments and conversation. And now, as you leave this place, may your hearts and your minds be filled with memories of Ken. May you be inspired to live each day with more gratitude, generosity, character, and service. And may you remember that while Ken's earthly journey is complete, his journey with God has just begun. May the peace of God, which passes all understanding, keep your hearts and your minds in the knowledge and love of God and of his Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Go in peace. Amen.